Morning. So yeah, for our next session with the agency's perspective, we have 4 speakers. I think that 3 of them are online. Well, actually, yeah, 3 of them are online and 1 in person. Yes, great. So yeah, I'm gonna introduce them first. First, we have Atta Hussain from WMO. He's a scientific officer and a disaster risk reduction technical development division officer, and works at the World Meteorological Organization. So he's gonna be our first speaker today. Then we'll have Monica Copas. Sorry in advance if I'm misspelling or mispronouncing the names here. She's a program manager for the Atmospheric Chemistry, Carbon Cycle, and Climate Competitive Research Program at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Then we'll have Maria Ule from, it's a program director for international activities and co-chair of the Belmont Forum from the National Science Foundation. And finally, we'll have Kenneth McClune, Environment Officer for the Bureau for Resilience, Environment and Food Security at the United States Agency for International Development. So you all will have 20 minutes. For those who are online, I think that probably when we have the final minute, I can let you know. And for the person in person, you can come here if you want with me in the table, but if not, yes. Okay, no worries. So yeah, first we have Atta Hussain. So please, Atta, go ahead. Welcome, and the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you very much for inviting me to this African-focused workshop to provide information about WMO, especially WMO's severe weather forecasting program, which is also implemented in several sub-regions in Africa. So if you allow me, I can share my screen.
Can
you see
do we have? No.
Can you see my screen?
Oh, now, yeah, there we go.
Oh, thank you. So in my presentation, I will be mainly talking about WMO severe weather forecasting program, which was initially started as a demonstration project in Southern Africa in 2006. And later on, it was expanded to several sub-regions, including in Africa, Asia, and South Pacific, and also in Eastern Caribbean. And the main objective of this program is to improve the accessibility and availability of the numerical weather prediction outputs from the global centers for the national met services in developing countries and LDCs and small island developing states. So in my presentation, I have included one slide just to provide information about WMO structure in brief for those especially who have limited knowledge about WMO. And then I have a few slides on WMO integrated prediction and processing system, WIPS, which is actually mainly providing NWP data and forecast products to the national met services in member countries. And then I have a introduction slides on SWFP, and then I will present some information about the SWFP regional sub-programs which are implemented in Africa. And I also have included a few examples from Asia also for information to know what we are doing in Asia as well. And then I have a few slides on capacity development activities, which we generally carried out as part of SWFP to improve the capacity of the national met services and their users on making best use of the information which are made available through this program. And then I have one slide on SWFP and how it can contribute to early warning for all initiative to assist our members. And then I have one slide on conclusions. So in my first slide, which is about WMO structure, WMO is a United Nations specialized agency for meteorology. I mean, for weather, climate, and water and related environmental services. And currently we have a membership of 193 members, which include 187 member states and 6 territories. And each of our member has its own meteorological service to provide services within its jurisdiction. And WMO has 4 constituent bodies. The first one is the World Meteorological Congress, which is the supreme body of WMO. And then there is Executive Council, which is actually the members of this Executive Council are selected by the World Meteorological Congress every 4 years. And it oversees the decisions made by Congress for its implementation. And then as part of WMO, there are 6 regional associations in different 6 regions of the world, including for Africa also. We have a regional association for Africa, which we call it Regional Association 1. And then we have technical commissions. Currently, we have 2 technical commissions. One is for basically observations and infrastructure. And the second one is mainly for services for different sectors, including application sectors. And in short, we call them INFCOM or SERCOM. And then in addition to these constituent bodies, we also have some additional bodies which are established by WMO for a specific advice on particular subjects. As part of WMO infrastructure, basically we have 3 main systems. The first one is related to the observation, which we call WMO Integrated Global Observing System. Then we have WMO Integrated Processing and Prediction System, which is related to forecasting. And then WMO Information System, which is for communication of products and data among members and exchange of data internationally. WIPS is especially relevant for WMO severe weather forecasting program because SWFP makes use of the WIPS centers to make available different products in different subregions from the relevant regional specialized meteorological centers. And WIPS is organized in a 3 level of system or centers or activities. The first one is the World Meteorological Centers. Currently, we have 10 World Meteorological Centers, which mainly run global NWP system to provide data and products to WMO member countries. And then we have several types of regional specialized meteorological centers, which are also mainly hosted by our members. And then we have national met centers, which belongs to each of WMO member states and territories. And responsibilities of each of these centers actually can be available in the manual on WIPS, which is available on WMO e-library. Its recent edition has been published just very recently. And as part of WIPS activities, there are currently around 30 activities with broad categories of general purpose and specialized activities, and then non-real-time activities. As you can see on the screen, there is one activity which is related to regional severe weather forecasting. And there are currently 5 regional specialized meteorological centers for this activity, including 4 centers are in Africa and 1 center in South Pacific. There are also other regional centers which are providing services as part of severe weather forecasting program, but they are not yet officially designated as RSMCs. But I hope maybe in future, some of them, they may apply to become officially an RSMC. And then as part of general purpose activities, as you can see on the top, there are global deterministic NWP, and then also for limited area modeling for this activity. And then we have global ensemble and also limited area ensemble. These are the actually four types of centers which provide global and regional NWP information as part of severe weather forecasting program. And RSMCs in each sub-region, they do the analysis of those global NWP information and provide guidance to the neighboring NMHS on various types of agreed hazards, for example, heavy rainfall or strong wind or high waves. And criteria of these hazards have been also agreed among the national met centers and the regional center which provide guidance in each sub-region. And WIPS information is available for those who are interested in to get more information about various types of WIPS that is available on WIPS web portal and also on WMO community platform. And you can find the contact details and the types of products each RSMC provide as part of their WIPS services. And now I come to SWFP introduction. As I mentioned in the beginning, that SWFP was started as a demonstration project in 2006. And later on, it was expanded to several other regions. Currently, it covers around 85 countries, including mainly LDCs and small island developing states in 9 subregions. And you can see 4 of these 9 subregions are in Africa. And we have 3 subregions in Asia and 1 in Eastern Caribbean and 1 in South Pacific. And for each of the subregion, there are a few world meteorological centers engaged which provide global NWP information as part of the SWFP cascading forecasting process. And the responsible regional center in each subregion, they maintain a password protected website to cascade the information to the national met centers, and then also to maintain that web portal to provide guidance at least once a day for short and medium range forecast up to 5 days for identified hazards. And the national met centers, then they are responsible to issue their own national forecast and local warnings considering the guidance which they receive from the RSMCs in their region. And all of the 10 WMCs, they contribute to this program for the moment. And here you can see the timeline of development of various SWFP regional sub-programs in various sub-regions. And currently, as you know, we have 9 sub-regions which are covered by SWFP, but in this year, we are also planning to expand SWFP in Southeastern Asia, Oceania sub-region. And we will do a scoping exercise in collaboration with our relevant members and those centers which can potentially contribute to this sub-region. And at global level, the SWFP is overseen by our Services Commission with the help of a standing committee on DRR and public services, which is assisted by an advisory group on severe weather forecasting. The advisory group on severe weather forecasting is mainly comprised the designated experts from the regional centers which provide regional severe weather forecasting services. And in each sub-region, SWFP regional sub-programs are managed by a regional sub-program management team, which mainly consists of the focal points from each benefiting national met center and also for those who contribute. I mean the world met centers and the regional centers. So in a way, it is managed by those who benefit and by those who contribute to each SWFP regional sub-program. And the activities in each sub-regions, they are supported by extra budgetary resources because currently WMO don't have any regular budget for this. That's why we count on our development partners and donors and members to provide support for the regional activities in each sub-region. And the last meeting of the advisory group face-to-face meeting was held in New Delhi last year in September. Advisory group is chaired by an expert from RSMC Wellington, and its vice chair is from India. And this is the list of the 9 ongoing SWFP regional sub-programs. And as I briefly explained earlier, that SWFP make use of the contributions from the WIP centers to implement and sustain a cascading forecasting process from global to regional to national level. And the guidance which is received to the national MES centers, they translate the information into their alerts and local warnings to their stakeholders and users. And in addition to to improve the accessibility and availability of the NWP products, we have a capacity development component also as part of this program, because the national med centers, they also need to have a capacity how they can make best use of the information and how they can translate the guidance into their own national and local forecasts. And for this purpose, we generally organize regular training workshops with the help of our development partners as feasible. And we invite operational forecasters to attend that workshop. And then in the second component of the workshop, we also encourage the host country to invite representatives from their stakeholders and users to improve engagement between the national med centers and the users, and to tailor the information according to users' needs, including for example, impact-based forecast and warning services, and how to communicate uncertainty and how to provide tailor-made services for different users. And for this purpose, we generally conduct regional workshops in each sub-region, subject to the availability of resources, of course. And we also sometimes organize regional training desks, which are hosted by the regional center to share the information between the national med centers and the regional forecasters in terms of the local knowledge, to improve the guidance and also to better understand the guidance products issued by the regional center. And in case of small countries, we also conduct in-country training workshops, because especially for NMHS, which are having limited human resources, they cannot spare their forecasters to attend countries, to attend training workshops in foreign countries for extensive time. So then we send our experts and trainers to those countries to impart training to the forecasters and the representatives of the users. In addition to that, there is also opportunity which we explore in collaboration with the WMCs to send forecasters or NWP experts from those centers who have implemented NWP high resolution, to train them on NWP in the limited area modeling. And also we make use of the e-learning resources which are available on different platforms. And in Africa, we have 4 regional sub-programs, as I mentioned before. And the first one was implemented in 2006 in Southern Africa, and then in 2010, it was in Eastern Africa. Then in 2015, we started in West Africa, and the latest one was started in 2019 for Central Africa. And I will provide you in later slides some more detailed information about the status of these regional sub-programs. And that slide is about SWFP in Southern Africa, which is actually operational since 2012. And currently it benefits 16 countries in Southern Africa sub-region. And the contributing global centers include WMCs, ECMWF, and Exeter and Washington. And the regional centers for severe weather forecasting is hosted by South Africa Weather Service in Pretoria. And for the tropical cyclone forecast guidance, it comes from our regional center in La Reunion. to provide forecast support and guidance in terms of tropical cyclones. And that regional sub-program is supported currently by CRU's Southwest Indian Ocean project. And also recently we are getting support from Wiser Africa also, which is coordinated by Metaphors UK. And in the past we received funding from Norwegian government and also from USAID, which was specifically meant for integration of SWFT with the flash flood guidance system in South Africa, because RSMC Pretoria is also the regional center for flash flood guidance system, which covers 9 countries. And this is the web portal of RSMC Pretoria, which has been launched. The new portal has been launched. Interface has been launched very recently in January. And in addition to the guidance product, they also provide products related to the nowcasting. And this is the template of guidance, which includes a map to highlight the areas of severe weather in the form of polygons, and also there is some discussion by the forecaster in the regional office to help the national forecasters in the national net services. And it also includes a table of risk and probability also, which is not shown here in the presentation. And these are a few examples of the nowcasting products. And as part of CRU's Southwest Indian Ocean, RSMC Pretoria is doing enhancement of its web portal, and also it will support expansion of the nowcast product footprint, because currently some of the island states are not covered by these nowcasting products. For example, Mauritius and Seychelles and Comoros. So with the support of this project, they will expand the coverage of the domain to cover these countries as well. And the last meeting of the regional sub-program management team of this region was held last year in November, and it was also supported by Wiser Africa and Group Southwest Indian Ocean component. And in addition to that, the Wiser Early Warnings for Southern Africa, which is led by University of Leeds, they are also supporting to improve nowcasting tools and skills in the region.
Excuse me, you have 1 minute.
Yes, thank you. I will try to be quick. Thank you. and that the slide is about Eastern Africa. Maybe I can go through quickly, which involves 7 countries. And the regional centers are based in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. And they also maintain their websites. And for West Africa, regional center is based in Dakar. And it involves 16 countries. The recent addition is Mauritania. And it is also supported by different CRU's funded project. And in Central Africa, also RSMC Dakar is providing guidance to 7 countries. And these are the few examples of the guidance provided to Central African NMHS by RSMC Dakar. And in Asia, just I can maybe skip those slides. These are the actually products and guidance which is provided by our regional center in Hanoi to Southeast Asia, and then RSMC New Delhi provide guidance in South Asia. And then Roshydromet provide guidance to 5 NMHS in Central Asia. And as part of capacity development activities, we have done quite a number of activities during recent years, as you can see on the slide. And we also presented our experience with the online workshops, which we did during COVID era, especially during 2021 and 22. And last year, we conducted 4 SWFT workshops, and we also supported participation of of African NWP experts to attend NWP high resolution training at German Med Service last year in March. And then in support of early warning for all, SWFP aims to scale up, including not only to expand its geographical coverage to more countries and sub-regions which are currently not covered by SWFP. And we will also try to improve the guidance product, and RSMC may also consider to provide guidance for additional hazards, for example, heat waves or skull lines and a forest fire in future. And this is my last slide. SWFP is an operational service which is maintained by a cascading forecasting process with in-kind contributions from the RIP centers, including WMCs and RSMCs. And it is very cost effective for the NMHS because they only need a good internet to get access to the SWFP web portals to have the information from different centers. But resource mobilization is a challenge for us because, as I mentioned earlier, all the regional activities are supported by with the help of our development partners and donors. And we also have linkages with other relevant programs and initiatives in various sub-regions. And collaboration with different research projects is also our aim. To actually support science to services, including for capacity development of our members on the new tools and products in support of early warning services. And then SWFP also offers to test drive different emerging new initiatives, for example, global multi-hazard alert system, and also cataloging of hazard and urban meteorological services. And in all these activities, especially which are related to provision of guidance, the role of RSMC is also very important and critical. And thank you very much. And this is my slides.
Thank you, Atta. So next speaker is Monica Copas. We're going to have the questions at the very end. We will have 20 minutes for the Q&A. So keep all your questions and then shoot them all together. So Monica, the virtual floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Manfu, for the invitation. Wish I could be there in person. I assume you can see my slides now. Sure.
Yes, we can see.
Yes, we can see your slides.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so good morning, everyone. I'm here to present NOAA's perspective on air quality in Africa. It's great to be here, and I look forward to learning a lot. As I think was mentioned earlier, I'm a program manager for the Atmospheric Chemistry, Carbon Cycle and Climate Program, the Climate Program Office at NOAA. And I'm listed here my other hats, if you will, just since it might be relevant for these conversations today and tomorrow. So I'm a NOAA co-chair representing NOAA at this Air Quality Community Health Research Subcommittee. That's a group under OSCP, and I'm also involved in the GeoXO that Fiona mentioned already briefly, especially for the atmospheric composition instrument, the ACX. And NOAA also has a One Health group, and I'm the air quality lead there. So all this to say is I'm involved in all these activities, so I have all kinds of interests in what we're going to talk about here today and tomorrow. So NOAA has a very broad mission that spans, atmosphere, ocean, fisheries, and all kinds of Earth system processes. But for the purposes of this workshop, I was just going to jump straight into the atmospheric composition. So just an overview that NOAA does have a lot of mandates to observe and predict atmospheric composition. So these span executive, legislative, and international agreements that we and mandates that we have. And what NOAA does is it does research and also provides operational products to address numerous applications and topics. And our underlying plan and goal is to protect lives and property. So for atmospheric composition, we have several topics on the bottom right here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, my mouse, but hopefully. And obviously air quality is one of them. So this is what I'll be mostly focused on here. So in terms of capabilities that we have to address all these topics is we have lots of measurements. NOAA conducts measurements from large aircrafts, small aircrafts, from uncrewed platforms as well. They're not listed here, and mobile platforms, ships. So we have pretty much everything. And for ground-based, mostly we have a lot of monitoring capabilities as well. Our long-term monitoring network around the globe, our also ship-based monitoring, and definitely satellites as well that I'll touch upon later as well. For models, we again have a whole gamut, everything from full Earth system, coupled Earth system model, to regional models, to dispersion models. You might be aware of our high split model that's used for many purposes. And we also provide services. We are an operational agency, so a lot of services that we offer in operations are things like air quality forecasting guidance. These are regular forecasts we provide for ozone, PM2.5, smoke, and dust for quality purposes. We also have other tools and other data provisions, such as aerosol watch. These are regular updates from satellites on what aerosol looks like around the globe. And also, depending on events, such as fires or chemicals fires and other spills, we also have our dispersion modeling tools to look at sources and other extreme events. So I also wanted to talk about just a little bit about what my program covers, uh, partly because while it mirrors and complements what NOAA scientists are doing, this is really the external community support that we provide. So if anything, NOAA undertakes, such as field campaigns, we do bring a lot of external community, and this is the program through which we support that. I co-manage this with Shiv Das, who you've met before, and some of our recent investments are on wildfire and smoke. I have this catch-all on chemical processes, basically lots of atmospheric chemistry. We also span greenhouse gases and our focus on urban atmosphere, so very relevant to air quality as well. And we do support a lot of research across lots of different platforms, so field measurements, ground-based measurements, monitoring. We also support some modeling, and we also have some support for satellite measurements, but we're involved a lot of ways through the program and the satellite activities at NOAA for air quality. So that's just a little bit about the program, and just given our focus and our interest in health, obviously we don't study health ourselves, but this is the picture that we're looking at for the purposes of this workshop. A lot of our uh, activities so far have been pretty domestically focused. You might have noticed this is just a CONUS and even the forecast guidance that we put out. But in terms of a global picture, we do see that this is where air quality burden is, right? From things like double burden of disease reports. So we recognize that in terms of where air quality is an issue to study, to understand, and obviously to mitigate. We're looking at a lot of countries in Africa and Asia. So, and another thing that we're looking at, especially from satellites, is that things have changed and are changing, right? So we look at, and I should mention these are some of the slides I got from Steve Brown, who I believe is attending the workshop as well. That, for example, if we just look at NOx emissions, that in the past few decades, things have changed globally, right? And the shift has been from the northern latitudes to the southern latitudes. So we have some successes in US and Europe in reducing our emissions, but we have increasing emissions in southern parts of the globe. So we're recognizing this, that things are changing, and it'd be important to capture that change, to understand it, to measure it. And this is the slides that I noticed Peter now also has, which so I would like to point out that clearly NOAA and UCAR align in our interests here, which is good to see. So as Peter now also mentioned, we have a lot of megacities in Asia right now, and what we're expecting in the future, of course, is that a lot of them will be popping up in Africa as well. And of course, with lots of megacities come a lot of different air pollution sources and air pollution challenges. And one thing that I think we really need to emphasize and understand and appreciate is that while NOAA does have all these capabilities and we have all probably seen a lot of measurements in US especially. Sources are different and across different countries in Africa and different cities. And that's something that we need to understand, learn about, and vegetation is different, climate is different. So this is a very different environment that we will be studying, and it will be there in 2100, also very different from, because it's a different starting point, different sources, but also it's might be evolving probably differently, right? So that's something that we really need to appreciate and understand. So in terms of NOAA's interest in air quality and emission in Africa, it's a twofold. One, public health, right? We're interested in health and lives and property. So public health is definitely our interest to us. And just noticing that a lot of air pollution mortality is already occurring in Africa. And not only is that a challenge, but also hopefully a promise for similar successes in Africa that we have seen in US and Europe with policies that have been enacted in the past few decades. So hopefully it's a solvable problem. So we need to just understand it, not just to learn interesting science, but also because that's equality should be a problem that we can solve. Another interest we have in African air quality is just the evolving emissions. We have seen that they've changed, and we can expect that they will change in the future because of different population change, different sources that are changing, evolving, and rapid population growth and urbanization. So that we can expect that the changes in emissions, and if they were to increase, that we can also expect that a significant portion of future emissions and around the globe could be coming from that region. So it could be a global impact that we should be understanding. Meanwhile, as was mentioned already, we have very little data, especially on the ground. So that's obviously a great motivation for NOAA to discuss what measurements can be taken, and obviously how we can partner with everyone on that. So while we do have very little measurements, just like Peter now, I wanted to show that we do have some measurements already. And of course, a lot of these are remote and from the satellites. So I was looking very closely which acronyms, instrument acronyms that Peter was mentioning, because one thing I definitely want to highlight is our JPSS constellation, our polar orbiters. So we have quite a few of them. They're on operations. They've been around and they will be around for decades. And the three crucial instruments that we have there are VIIRS, which provides things like fire detection, fire-related fire, and all hosts of aerosol information. We also have CRIS, and I should mention VIIRS is a basically operational version of MODIS. And so if you're familiar with MODIS, VIIRS is very, I like to say, improved version of that. CRIS is an instrument that's looking more in a metroposphere, but provides useful data for ozone, carbon dioxide, methane, and ammonia. That's the data we have from it so far. And then we also have on the same platform, same constellation, UMPS that Peter actually mentioned. That's the ozone, NO2, and formaldehyde kind of measurements that we get from that instrument. Follow on to OMI. And the top left shows us just how many instruments we have already in space. So MPP has been around for almost 2 decades. NOAA 20 was launched a few years ago. JPSS 2 was launched just a year and a half ago or so. And still coming right after it is JPSS 3 and 4. So this is a long-term investment. It's an operation, so it will be there. The products will be provided, and we can count on it. And actually, we're already starting to plan for JPSS follow-on. So this will continue into 2040s, and we're actively engaged in making sure that air quality is very well represented and accounted for in the new constellation. So another one I want to mention that Peter also talked about is the geostationary capabilities. We have our GeoXO plans coming up in the next decade whenever our current constellation GOES-R finishes launching new satellites. So right now we just have the visible near IR imagery from GOES-R. This is just over the US, east and west, and lightning mapping. But for next constellation for GeoXO, will actually have a dedicated atmospheric composition instrument. Not the greatest name, since we also expect some atmospheric composition data from the sounder and from the imager on the same constellation, but we'll take it. It's a dedicated quality instrument, which is really great, really new for US to have that dedicated instrument in operations. And it's basically operational version of Tempo. Nothing decided there yet, but if you need an image for that, what that will look like, what that will be capable of, it's basically that operational version of Tempo. And the leads there for that instrument are Shoa Contragunta and Greg Frost from NOAA. So I'm mentioning this because even though GeoXO will be flying over US, NOAA obviously has some expertise and capabilities to help the conversation that Peter mentioned, to bring those kind of capabilities over Africa. So we're very excited to be part of that conversation as well. So just to almost summarize what kind of activities NOAA has done so far, and to underscore that we have worked in Africa, even if it's a limited engagement so far. Actually, Atta just mentioned our African training desks, so for climate prediction. So NOAA Weather Service already has some very strong engagement with training for mostly weather forecasting. We have a very small effort on citizen science heat mapping. There's ocean acidification engagements, again, including training. We also have collaboration on implementation of Ocean Decade Africa Roadmap. It's in the UN activity, small blue carbon initiative. And also for air quality, we were engaged in a workshop that Solomon hosted last year, organized. We actually provided funding from the program for that workshop as well. So definitely very interested in what happens with all the discussions that have begun, maybe even before that, but are still ongoing regarding the potential field measurements in especially urban areas and across different countries in Africa. So very interested in to see what the discussions are leading to in terms of field measurements. And I thought I would maybe end with just a picture of what NOAA means when we say field measurements, because this is our latest example of what just happened last summer. Roma, you might have heard of this field campaign. And what this was a field effort means for NOAA and what it could mean and potentially in one of the urban areas, especially around Africa, is so we had a large aircraft, NOAA Roma in the middle here, flying around the country, sampling different air masses from different urban areas. But there were also other smaller aircrafts, even with their own acronyms here. You see NOAA have different labs, supported different measurements. We obviously worked with other agency partners. There's NASA, EPA, NOAA, NIST, NSF you see here. We also had measurements on the ground. So the few acronyms, I don't know if you can see them, it's kind of blocked for me. FROG, New York, and NYC METS were actually ground-based measurements that our program supported. So in collaboration, but separate. There were obviously some modeling efforts complementary to this measurement activity. There was tempo flying above all that already. So there were some satellite measurements. So this was a very coordinated effort that NOAA typically engages in. So just to give you an idea of the picture of a field campaign that NOAA tends to engage in. It obviously would look very different in African context. You see the skyline of New York here. Obviously, very different again, emission sources, different environments. So things would be obviously very different. Maybe different aircrafts, different platforms, more ground-based measurements, more uncrewed measurements. However, things evolved there. But just thought I'd mention this as a picture of an example of field measurements that we take at NOAA. So I think that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. Yeah, we'll follow with Maria from NSF. So please, the floor,
Great, wonderful,
floor is
thank you.
yours.
Great. I will share my screen here. Okay. Yeah. There. And for some reason, it's not going into. There we go. Okay. So thanks for inviting us. I am Maria Ewell. I'm a program director for international activities in the Geosciences Directorate in a newly formed division called RISE, which is Research, Innovation, Synergies, and Education. We have several programs that I think will be of interest. What I'm going to talk mostly about today, though, is the Belmont Forum, and that is really a group of funding agencies from 31 funding agencies from across the globe. And we are getting my slides done here. We represent 55 different countries. You can see here the map that provides you with at least some of the actual members. And you can see that there's not that many members from Africa. However, we have partnered with over 150 resource organizations over the past 10 or 12 years now. And we have been able to support the participation of African scientists in our research projects through these particular programs. So I want to tell you a little bit about the Belmont Forum, who we are and what we do. We are typically focusing on a lot of the things that Everett and Peter Nell talked about in the opening session. We are guided by what we call the Belmont Challenge, which is to understand, mitigate, and adapt to global environmental change. And we're really looking to accelerate the delivery of research that helps to remove critical barriers to sustainability. And we do that by aligning and mobilizing our international resources. So what does that actually mean? Well, we are a bunch of funding agencies that get together and we put out calls for proposals typically for what we call collaborative research actions. And these are focusing on addressing societally relevant challenges through transdisciplinary research approaches. So what does that actually mean? So for Belmont Forum, we fund projects that are transdisciplinary. For us, that is natural scientists, social scientists, engineers, medicine, working in conjunction with communities on the ground to actually co-design the project. So it's not science coming in and saying, I can fix your problem here, just do this. This is actually creating the trust and the communities where that bridge flows back and forth, or the conversation flows back and forth between those groups. So we will focus on that, but we also, and we realize that's a really big ask. So we do quite a few capacity building, networking activities that lead up to our collaborative research actions. So what kind of things do we focus on? Well, what you're seeing here on the left-hand side of the slide is what all of the collaborative research actions that we've had since 2012. And so you can see there are a wide variety of different topics. What we're trying to do here is focus on what our members typically have in their domestic programs that we can bring together and add value through the collaboration at the international scale. And we've been pretty successful, wide variety of topics, as I said before. But what we tend to do is to, as we move forward, look at the lessons learned from the various different collaborative research actions and the potential research gaps that were identified, and bring those together and kind of fold them into new collaborative research actions. So you can see here we had coastal vulnerability in 2012, and then a few years later, we did a disaster risk reduction resilience. So there's ways for the community to stay engaged with each other, but not always focusing on the exact same topic. But it will bring in and be, what do I want to say, applicable to others. So we have several upcoming ones that I'm going to talk to you about in just a second. But first, I want to really think about going over what actually goes into a Belmont Forum proposal. So it's a big ask. We are looking at what we call the multilateral approach. So all of our projects must have at least 3 different countries. They also must have at least 3 different funding agencies putting into and supporting a particular project. So the nice thing about that is we have one single proposal goes through one peer review process. So that really does lower the bar to the kind of double or triple jeopardy thing where, you and your partners put in proposals to your national programs. One of you gets funded, the other 2 don't, or whatever. And the whole idea just sort of stops there. So we are able to come to an agreement across all of the participating funding agencies to do that. So it will go through one peer review process. Once you are recommended for funding through the Belmont mechanism, it doesn't go through another review afterwards. So you turn to your funding agency that you're eligible to receive funds from, and they work with you to get the funding to you. So the way that we've worked this is that each funding organization has what we call an annex. And those are the real key points in this, is to look at the annex for your particular funding agency, because they outline which researchers are eligible, if there are any funding restrictions, or if there are any particular areas of interest within that call that they want to focus on. So the way then, as I said before, if you're recommended for funding, then you work with your national program to receive the funds. So researchers from countries that are not participating are also welcome, but they must bring their own funding or provide in-kind contribution. So what do we have coming up? So there are several calls for proposals that one of which will focus directly on Africa, but this one, the Amazon and tropical forests, and actually is now just called tropical forests, and its implications and needed urgent action. So what we are doing now, this will be announced in June of 2024. You can go on our website and I'll show you a link to that in just a second. But there are 4 themes looking at this: reduced deforestation, sustainable development, and the bioeconomy. There's ecosystem functioning and services and health. So a lot of the things that Monica just talked about would also fall in this. And again, these are not place-based so much as if there's a tropical forest in your area, then you can, and there are many within the African continent. So it's a good thing to have a look at this. The other theme there is violence and essential services. And the last one is climate change, science, and climate justice. So typically the way that we roll these things out is that we'll have a call announced. So the idea comes out, and then there's several months between when that call is announced and the pre-proposal submission. A lot of times that's a full pre-proposal. Other times it's called what we call a registration, or an expression of interest. But that's typically due several months after the idea is opened. And the reason we do that is that the Belmont Forum will create networking opportunities, webinars, those kinds of things to help bring the community together and advertise and answer a lot of questions. This is not the most straightforward program. It is once you get inside and you're helped along, but looking from outside in can be a little bit daunting. And then you can see that after the pre-proposal, there would be a full proposal submission later on in the year. So, and again, we try to keep as much space between the announcements and the deadlines to allow the groups to work together effectively. And then we would launch the projects sort of mid-2025 for the tropical forest one. And the projects would be about three or so years, depending on the appetite and support that's available from the funding agencies. When you are part of a Belmont Forum collaborative research action project funded under that, we consider you part of the community as well. So it's a little bit different than the way, say, NSF would do it, where you submit your proposal, you get your funds, and you go and you do your project. This approach really is about also, yes, definitely funding the great work that will come out of your project, but also making you part of a global community. And with the hopes that in the future, your group would then be able to take advantage of upcoming Belmont Forum calls for proposals and other activities that we have. So the next one, this is going to be the Africa Regional Call. So right now, we have a group that is focusing on bringing this out. We don't know exactly the launch date. The Tropical Forest one has a definite timescale that was set up. But Africa Regional Call, the potential themes that folks are looking at are water, energy, food, health nexus, land, air, and ocean pollution. So a lot of the things that Monica talked about would be directly under that. Disaster preparedness, responsiveness, and recovery. So we're looking at a wide variety. And again, this should be really noted that this has to be transdisciplinary research. So you have to have natural scientists and social sciences working together. So a lot of the things that Everett was talking about justice and equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion all fall in within the framework of the Belmont Forum. And again, very much like the Tropical Forest CRA, the Belmont Forum will be doing capacity building activities and collaborative networking activities along this within this group. Right now, we have several organizations that have signed on to support African scientists directly. And once the call is launched, all of the annexes will be there, so you can actually go in and have a look at which organizations you may be eligible to receive funds from. Okay, the next one is, so these are the Belmont Forum collaborative research actions that are launching in 2024. So the tropical forest ones. Oh, I should also mention that we are experimenting for the first time about letting the proposals come in more native languages. So not only English. So in the tropical forest one, we're going to open it up to have submissions either in Spanish or English. The Africa Regional one, again, will be able to be done in English and French, or French, not yet. In 2025, we're looking at potentially 3 more collaborative research actions. Again, pathways to sustainability would look at the trade-off and balances. So if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN, there's lots of, there are 17 of those with 169 targets. What we're trying to do here is to look at systems approaches. So if you are going to focus on life on land and underwater and diversity, equity, and inclusion, we would ask that you choose maybe 3 or so sustainable development goals and look at projects that actually try to determine pathways to sustainability, but looking at the trade-offs and balances of one decision for a particular SDG and how it might affect the other SDGs within that nexus. We also have one that will focus on vulnerability and resilience. And that one is sort of our disaster risk reduction resilience follow on. And opening in 2025, we'll also have Oceans 2. So this is in conjunction with the IOC to celebrate the UN Decade of the Ocean. So the best thing to absolutely do is to focus on connecting with the Belmont Forum. We have a website link there that you can sign up for newsletter, alerts, all sorts of different things. And then we also run webinars and things about, what is the Belmont Forum? How do I get in? How do I navigate this very interesting landscape? And we will work with folks to do that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we have this Congress that focuses on transdisciplinary research for focusing really on sustainability and the approaches to using transdisciplinary research to reach that. So every year since 2021, we have been meeting with different groups across the globe. We first started in Brisbane, Australia. Then we went to Pretoria, South Africa. Last year was in Panama City, Panama. This year in June, it will be in Helsinki, Finland. And then in June of 2025, it will all be coming to Chicago, Illinois. And this is a joint effort between Future Earth, which is a global environmental change large research community, the Belmont Forum, and then the local host will be the University of Illinois system. So there's a lot of different opportunities for the transdisciplinary approach to all of these kinds of issues to be highlighted here. A lot of networking. So it's a little different than, say, a typical AGU conference or an EGU conference, where it's all about the science and a little bit less about networking and training and things like that. So that is that option there. We do have scholarships for low to middle income country participants. And over the last several years, we've had over a couple thousand people at each of our different gatherings. So I think I will stop there and take any questions.
It's perfect timing. So yeah, for our last speaker is Kenneth McClune from USAID. And yeah, we'll have the questions after his presentation. Thank you.
So I'm not sure, can everyone hear me? Yeah, everyone online? How about if I'm out here? Does it work for everyone online? No, it doesn't. Okay, good. Good to know. I have a tendency to move around. I like to move around, so I'll try to stand still as much as possible. So I'm Ken McClune. I'm with USAID, the Resilience, Environment, and Food Security Bureau. As is typical of many USAID approaches and presentations, it's going to be very much focused on ourselves. But there's going to be a lot of metadata in there, a lot of meta information about how we are trying to take climate information and bring it to the needs on the ground. As I talk about ourselves, I'm going to also try to show you why we're doing this and how we are bringing this information to people in need. Next slide, please. So today I'm going to talk about the climate strategy, the USAID climate strategy, which is fairly new. It was very, very unique. It was unique in the sense that it brought multiple different offices and bureaus together to understand how climate will impact different sectors. Now, USAID is very sector focused, very siloed and very institutionally piped. So it has a tendency to do things off on its own. And so trying to bring people together around climate was vital in order to integrate climate across the agency's work. So without urgent action, climate change could push an additional 100 million people into poverty by 2030. This was what we saw, right? So our calling was to find a way to address that issue. Next slide, please. Every USAID sector and mission, and so our offices overseas are called missions, has a role to play as we help the global system address climate change. And as we know, climate change is one of the first of these global issues that we're having to address, right? There's going to be pandemics. We've seen that already. There's water security issues, food web collapse, okay? These are big, serious things. And one of the things that is good about climate change is that it is fundamentally making us address our organizational mismatch with the problem. These institutional silos are part of the challenge that we need to overcome. Next slide, please. So USAID has been doing climate work for a number of years before our new climate strategy. And what we've been focusing on are sort of the funding silos, which are the renewable energy to avoid future emissions, natural climate solutions, so bringing in, preventing deforestation and increasing management of forests so they're maintained, adaptation to the challenges that we're going to get, and climate risk management in order to address how climate might affect outcomes. And that was a main avenue for integration, was through climate risk management. Next slide, please. As you can see, some of the work that has been done around this, you can see in Africa that a large number of, or the lower income countries in general, most of the emission comes from land use. So it's about changes in land use. So it's about addressing issues around deforestation and land degradation. And so a lot of effort goes into that. Now, there's been this refocus also on mitigation, right? In the national adaptation plans, but also in the nationally determined contributions, NDCs. So one of the big concerns is about justice, right? People have not been producing the emissions, are now being asked to prevent emissions. And so key to that is also understanding development pathways and understanding how development will happen and how it promotes emissions. And so bringing that knowledge also into bear will help reduce future emissions while we're also addressing the impacts of climate change. Next slide, please. This is an example of one of our mechanisms. So we call our funding pools mechanisms. And this is CASI. And one of the points of CASI, so USAID is it's an unusual agency in that we're kind of, in some sense, it's like a bunch of bureaucrats who are trying to do something good in the world. Not to say anything against other bureaucrats. Everyone's trying to do something good, but they put the good out front and then they try to fit it into the bureaucracy. So it also means that we are like trying to herd cats, right? So every mission, every bureau, every office has its own opinion and it goes all over the place and it's trying to do the best it can. And that is kind of the meta information right there, right? Is that we adapt ourselves to meet the challenge. And for science, that can be a challenge because oftentimes we arrive as the expert with truth. And so, development has learned in 60 years and trying to integrate the fact that as people from an external setting, we bring our own mindsets with that. And so in order to integrate our knowledge with local knowledge, it's one of becoming more humble about what we can provide, listening better to what the local narrative is and trying to match it with that. So a mechanism like CASI attempts to do this work from the local level up to bring more information into the nationally determined contributions and supporting countries in establishing and maintaining these their objectives. Next slide, please. So this is our climate strategy. This is how we're going to address several, these are some of our targets. We have 6 billion metric tons of CO2e reduced. We want to protect 100 million hectares of land, forests. 500 million people we want to promote in adaptation. $150 billion in climate finance. We're hoping for a good chunk of that from the private sector as well, working hard on private sector adaptation finance. 80 countries supported in their NDC NAPs. Of that, half of them, we are supporting systems change to that underlying goal. And I'll go a little bit into systems change in a bit. Critical populations, the marginalized folks, increase equitable engagement and voice and what they get out of the impact as well. In 40 countries, another systems change target. Next slide, please. We have embedded principles within our climate strategy. They're locally led development. We've heard a little bit about that already. Equity and inclusion, increasing the voice and awareness of those that we are seeking to support and promote locally led development and outcomes that meet the needs. Private sector engagement, nature-based solutions, and evidence and innovation. So these are the principles that underlie how we're going forward. Next slide, please. This is our framework. It's a lot of words, but I wanted to highlight our SO1 is about targeted direct actions, what we can do now. We know we can do a lot of things now, and maybe that will be 80% of our work, right? But let's address these now issues, because now issues keep us working, putting out fires, quite literally. So it's a reduce emissions, build resilience, mobilize finance, partner with indigenous peoples, and amplify critical voices, crucial voices. Our strategic objective 2 is systems change. That, to put it in a sort of a simple frame, it's a little bit more complex than this, but this is more long-term thinking. Let's try to prevent the fires from happening. Let's set up situations where when development happens, it's lower emission or no emission or reverse emission, let's even say. So it's transform key systems, advance like essential services to reduce emissions and enhance climate resilience. It's shift market signals. It's improve governance and work across assistance types. So, you know, a lot of that looks a little internal about how do we align all of our assistance types so that they are addressing climate change. And then we have do our part, our special objective 3, which is about not being part of the problem. Next slide, please. So that was where we've been, and this is where we're going. It's an all hands on deck. It's an entire agency effort at addressing climate change. It's bringing climate into health, into education, into all what are very siloed aspects within the agency, and I'd say globally in general. Locally led and equitable. We're trying. And systems change. And this is what's different about how we're taking this approach. Next slide, please. So all hands on deck action in the education sector example is build climate into school curricula, partner with public and private sector to train youth in green jobs. We also have design schools to better withstand climate disasters. So it's a two-pronged approach, the impact of climate on the education sector and the impact the education sector can have on our climate challenges, both in learning about adaptation, but also learning about mitigation and how to promote a mitigation economy. Next slide, please. This is a slide that shows those two different aspects of it, right? So climate resilient education system and climate resilient learners. Next slide. This is health. The Health Bureau, its own bureau, also integrated climate into its work. There's once again a very busy slide, but there's a lot going on there around injury, the impact of climate on health and injury, adverse pregnancy outcomes, malnutrition, heat. So one of the interesting things I found in joining the agency is that they considered health a non-climate sector up until just recently. It's kind of a shock to me, but there's so many linkages between health and climate change through waterborne disease, vector-borne disease, heat, that it's kind of surprising. Next slide, please. So direct climate impacts on health: dehydration, heat stroke, kidney disease, increased risk of drowning, physical injury. Next slide. And also looking at the indirect, right? Respiratory illnesses, vector-borne disease, increased spread of waterborne disease. Next slide. And risks to health and human systems, malnutrition, damaged healthcare facilities, and of course, the psychology of climate change. By the way, we don't talk enough as climate scientists about our own psychology and having to deal with like what's going on in the world. Next slide, please. I also wanted to show you some of our cool satellite-based stuff. We're working with NASA on Severe, which is a way of partnering at the local level to engage locally led and bottom-up processes with output from satellites. So Severe is sort of like a climate services or a satellite climate services effort from USAID and NASA. Next slide, please. And it focuses on countries in Asia, Africa, and the Americas. And there are hubs around the world. And you can see that there's a Southern Africa hub and a South and a West Africa hub, where they focus on bringing climate data from satellites and different information from satellites and integrating it into local decision-making and planning. Next slide, please. There's also Fragile Waters. This is a way of supporting, it's another buy-in mechanism. And it's a way for the missions to support efforts at the local level to integrate climate into local planning, improve governance around climate, to do a number of different aspects or ways of integrating the two. So develop robust and resilient local water, sanitation, hygiene systems, et cetera. So it's a way of improving and working on the governance issues around climate and the local situation. Next slide, please. There's systems change. That's another thing that we're doing differently. And this is how we use advanced activity design. In USAID, our projects, I call it activities. I guess we're big enough where we get to create our own words. So activities are projects. And the way we do that through advanced activity design is where we integrate climate or systems changes through what we call the systems design framework. And that is a means by which we bring in systems thinking. So humans have this tendency to see a problem and want to address that problem. And it just makes sense, right? Usually that works. But sometimes that problem has an underlying cause that you can't see right away. And so this is about deliberately, thoughtfully stopping and saying, well, let's unpack this problem and see if that's actually the problem or if it's just a symptom of the underlying problem. And so through this unpacking, we then find key leverage points to make the changes we need to do. And that second diamond within that diamond, and if you go to the next slide, I think I've got just those pieces. Yeah, that's the challenge, identifying the challenge, unpacking the challenge, understanding it better. And the second is the intervention, building the activity, and that is a human-centered design approach that has to do with working with local partners and co-development of an understanding. So it's not just transdisciplinary, but it's transcultural. And it's a way of bringing in the expert knowledge, which is the local knowledge, and supporting that with knowledge about climate, supporting that with knowledge about floods, et cetera. So environmental knowledge is in support of the local knowledge system. And next slide, please. So as our administrator, Samantha Power, said, our entire agency is a climate agency now. Every USAID bureau and mission will play a part in meeting these strategic objectives, be it through direct climate work or integrating it across in non-direct ways. So it's key that we address the climate challenge. There are multiple challenges that we're trying to address all at one time, but climate underpins many or most of those. Next slide. So with that, I want to thank you and appreciate your attention. And here's my contact info. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Kenneth.